There is a city nestled between mountains so green, so impossibly lush, that the first Europeans to see them thought they had stumbled into paradise. A valley shielded from the harshest Caribbean winds, sitting at just the right elevation to stay mild and pleasant almost year-round. When the Spanish conquistador Diego de Losada rode into that valley in 1567 and planted his flag, he called the settlement Santiago de León de Caracas. He could not have imagined what would grow there. He could not have imagined what would also die there. This is the story of Caracas, a city that has been everything: colonial outpost, revolutionary cradle, oil boom town, modernist dream, and finally a cautionary tale written in crumbling concrete and empty supermarket shelves. To understand Caracas is to understand Venezuela itself, its extraordinary promise, its fatal contradictions, and the way a nation can rise so fast and fall even faster. The valley was home to the Caracas people, part of the Carib-speaking groups that populated much of northern South America. They were not a passive people. When the Spanish arrived in force, the Caracas fought back for 2 decades. Villages burned, expeditions retreated. The indigenous people understood, perhaps instinctively, that what the Spanish offered was not exchange, but erasure. Diego de Losada changed the equation in 1567, not through superior courage, but through superior numbers and the brutal efficiency of colonial warfare. The Caracas people were broken, their valley was taken, and Santiago de León de Caracas was born on their bones. For the first 2 centuries of its existence, Caracas was modest, a cathedral, a main plaza, the kind of grid-pattern settlement the Spanish stamped across the Americas like a bureaucratic template. Sitting roughly 900 meters above sea level, it was cooler than the sweaty coastal port of La Guaira, just 40 kilometers away. The Spanish elite found it agreeable. They built their houses there. They created a landed aristocracy that would, in time, turn against the very empire that created it. On July 24, 1783, in a house in the old center of Caracas, a child was born to one of the city's elite Creole families. His name was Simón José Antonio de la Santísima Trinidad Bolívar y Palacios Ponte y Blanco. History would call him simply Simón Bolívar. The Bolívars were beneficiaries of the Spanish imperial system in every material sense, and yet Bolívar would dedicate his life and nearly destroy his health, his fortune, and his sanity to tearing that system apart. Part Enlightenment philosophy, part Creole resentment of being treated as second-class Spaniards, and part the peculiar alchemy that produces great historical figures, the right person in the right place at the right moment. On April 19, 1810, Caracas's municipal council deposed the Spanish colonial governor. Within a year, it had become something far more radical. On July 5, 1811, Venezuela declared full independence, the first Spanish colony in South America to do so. The wars that followed were among the bloodiest in the Western Hemisphere. Venezuela lost, by some estimates, 1/4 of its entire population. Caracas was sacked, occupied, liberated, and sacked again. The Great Earthquake of 1812, which leveled much of the city, was used by royalist priests as evidence that God was punishing the rebels. A lesser man might have given up. Bolívar did not. For the rest of the 19th century, Venezuela lurched from one caudillo to the next. Civil wars erupted with depressing regularity. The economy depended on coffee, cacao, cattle hides. The country was poor in the way that most of Latin America was poor, not destitute, but perpetually unable to escape a low-level equilibrium of debt, dependency, and dysfunction. And then, in 1914, a drilling team hit oil. Oil transformed Caracas the way it transformed everything in Venezuela, instantly, completely, and with consequences still playing out today. By the 1920s, Venezuela was producing more oil than almost any country on earth. Government revenues exploded. The dictator Juan Vicente Gómez used that money to modernize the country and to enrich himself spectacularly. But he did something no Venezuelan leader had done before. He paid off the national debt. All of it. What happened next was extraordinary. Caracas in the 1940s and 1950s became one of the most ambitious construction projects in the world. The dictator Marcos Pérez Jiménez, who held power from 1948 to 1958, would turn the city into a showcase of modernity. He brought in the great urbanist Carlos Raúl Villanueva, who transformed the Central University into a UNESCO World Heritage masterpiece, where Alexander Calder designed the auditorium ceiling and Fernand Léger created murals for the walkways. It was stunning. It still is. Pérez Jiménez replaced the old colonial city with highways, modernist towers, and the super bloques, enormous housing complexes for the rural migrants flooding in from the countryside. He blasted a highway through the mountains to the coast. He built the Gran Hotel Humboldt on the peak of the Ávila, accessible by cable car, overlooking the city like something from a fever dream. For a brief, intoxicating moment, Caracas felt like the future. But there was a problem baked into the miracle itself. Venezuela was not building a diversified economy, it was spending oil money. The phrase Venezuelans used for the alternative was sowing the oil, using petroleum wealth as seeds to grow something sustainable. But the seeds were mostly being eaten. When democracy arrived in 1958, oil money kept flowing. The 1960s and 1970s were Venezuela's golden age. Caracas exploded past 2 million people and kept growing. The city sprawled up the hillsides with informal settlements, the barrios, a sea of brick and concrete climbing impossibly steep terrain, colorful and chaotic and full of life. In 1973, the OPEC oil embargo quadrupled global oil prices overnight. President Carlos Andrés Pérez nationalized the oil industry, creating PDVSA, and promised that Venezuela's oil wealth would now belong to all Venezuelans. In Caracas, you could feel the intoxication. Oil prices collapsed in the 1980s. Venezuela had borrowed heavily against future revenues. In February 1983, a date Venezuelans call Black Friday, the government devalued the Bolivar. Savings evaporated, the cost of imports skyrocketed. And then came February 27, 1989. Pérez, returning for a second term, announced an IMF-backed austerity package. Bus fares in Caracas doubled overnight. The city erupted. What followed is known as the Caracazo. For several days, Caracas descended into rioting and looting on a scale the country had never seen. The poor poured out of the hillsides and into the wealthier neighborhoods below. The army was deployed. The death toll is still disputed. Official figures said around 300. Independent estimates ran far higher. Mass graves were found years later. The Caracazo was not just a riot. It was the fracture point, the moment the social contract of Venezuela's democratic era broke apart. It created a political vacuum. Into that vacuum, 3 years later, stepped a lieutenant colonel with a red beret and a taste for Venezuelan history. His name was Hugo Chávez. On February 4, 1992, Chávez led a military coup attempt. It failed. Before being taken away, he made a brief television appearance and said their goals had not been achieved. Pura hora. For now. 2 words. They made him a symbol of defiance for millions who felt left behind. Chávez was pardoned, ran for president in 1998, and won in a landslide. He used surging oil revenues to fund massive social programs, free healthcare clinics, subsidized food markets, literacy campaigns, university access for the poor. The barrios of Caracas, long neglected, suddenly had schools and medical centers. For millions who had never felt included in the country's prosperity, Chávez was a revelation. But he was also dismantling institutions. He rewrote the constitution. He packed the courts. He turned PDVSA into a political instrument, firing 18,000 experienced workers after a strike in 2002 and replacing them with loyalists. The technical expertise walked out the door and never came back. When Chávez died of cancer in March 2013, oil was still above $100 a barrel. The problems were visible to economists, but masked by petrodollars. Then the slide began. By 2016, oil was below $30. And Venezuela, which had imported nearly everything and produced almost nothing except oil, had nothing left to sell. What happened to Caracas after 2014 is almost impossible to describe without superlatives, and yet every superlative is accurate. Inflation became hyperinflation. At its peak, prices were doubling every few weeks. The Bolivar became so worthless that merchants weighed banknotes instead of counting them. Food disappeared from shelves. Medicines became impossible to find. The murder rate soared to over 100 per 100,000 people per year, roughly 20 times the rate of most major American cities. Walking the wrong street at the wrong time was one of the most dangerous things a person could do anywhere in the world. By the early 2020s, an estimated 7 to 8 million Venezuelans had left the country, roughly a quarter of the entire population. A diaspora defined by loss, spread across Colombia, Peru, Chile, Brazil, the United States, and beyond. In Caracas, the emptying was visible. Buildings stood half empty. The subway fell into disrepair. The superblocks Perez Jimenez had built as visions of working-class modernity became vertical slums, many controlled by criminal gangs called colectivos, operating in a grey zone between political enforcers and independent criminal enterprises, maintaining a brutal order the official police either could not or would not provide. And yet, Caracas did not die. Cities are extraordinarily resilient. Informal markets spread across the city, selling everything at prices set in US dollars, which had become the real currency of daily life. A strange dollarized economy emerged, half official and half improvised, functioning in the cracks of a system that had officially failed. The Avila, or Guaraira Repano, restored to its indigenous name, rose over the city as it always had, green and indifferent, unchanged by everything below. Caraqueños had always loved that mountain. Its presence felt like permanence in a world that would not stop changing. What does Caracas tell us? Perhaps that cities are repositories of decisions. Every highway and tower and barrio and crumbling facade is the physical expression of a choice made by a dictator, a president, an oil executive, a family moving from the countryside in search of a better life. The beauty and the dysfunction of Caracas are both inherited. They were built. The story of Caracas is also the story of what economists call the resource curse. Countries with enormous natural wealth often end up worse off than countries with none. Oil made it possible to skip the hard work of building a diversified economy, to import everything and export only one thing. And when that one thing lost its value, there was nothing left. But the resource curse is not really a curse. It is a choice. Norway has oil, so does Canada. They made different choices. Venezuela's tragedy is not inevitable. It is instructive. Simón Bolívar died in 1830, bitterly disillusioned, believing he had ploughed the sea, done all that labor for nothing. He was wrong. The countries he liberated are real. Venezuela is real, Caracas is real, but there is a melancholy irony in the fact that the liberator's birthplace became, 2 centuries later, a symbol of everything he most feared. A republic captured by strongmen, its resources squandered, its people impoverished, its institutions hollowed out. The mountains still stand. The valley is still green. The city still breathes. Caracas carries all of its history in its body. The colonial grid, the modernist towers, the hillside barrios, the murals, the cable car to a mountain hotel that still operates intermittently as a ghost of a more confident era. To try to understand Caracas is to confront the deepest questions human societies face. What do we owe each other? How do we govern wealth that fortune gives us? What happens when institutions fail? And how do the choices of the powerful land on the lives of ordinary people just trying to get through the day? Caracas does not answer those questions, but it makes them impossible to ignore. If this made you think differently about a city you thought you knew, that's exactly what this channel is for. Every week we go beneath the surface of history to find the stories that got left out, the ones that are uncomfortable, the ones that matter. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and leave a comment below. Which city's hidden history should we uncover next?